Welcome to the Nomad webinar. Today we'll be giving you an overview of our new 105 version, which went live 3 weeks ago. I'm Dana Williams, Head of Global Accounts at Orchard & Grove, the parent company of Nomad, and I'm joined today by Joel Rennick, founder of Nomad, who will lead us through the updates of the product over the next hour. Please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A button on your screen, and we'll answer your questions as they fit into the discussion, and we'll save some time for some more of them near the end. So let's get started. Joel?
Thank you, Dana. Wonderful to be here. Thanks to everyone for joining. I think we have a couple of different continents represented. Very excited to share with you a couple of things, some new accounts or new products that we've got for you that we've got some beta programming launching today. And then also kind of go over some of the new stuff that we've done in the last couple of weeks. So I'm Joel Rennick, as Dana introduced, the founder and creator of Nomad. And like I said, a lot of cool things to talk about since Nomad's only been out for a little bit. So if you're new to Nomad, we've got some walkthroughs on the web. We've also got some videos that you can go through as well. But just wanted to real quick introduce Nomad stands for No More AD. And ideally get you into a position where you don't have to bind your Macs to Active Directory anymore. And in a perfect world, gives you everything you like about Active Directory, but without having to mess around with the bind or be specifically attached to an Active Directory domain. So you can get single sign-on, password expiration warnings, password changes, local password sync, Windows certificates, a number of other things. And since we're admins ourselves, we wanted to make sure that it was very easy to manage and very customizable. And so we've put all that together into an open source package. And then we have a couple other products following on from that. So first I wanted to introduce Nomad 105. We released it about 2 weeks ago, July 17th of 2017. A couple of big features in there. We'll go over these in a little bit more detail as we go forward. But we're able to hide more menu items. This has been important to us because we know everyone uses Nomad in a slightly different way. So we wanted to make sure that you'd have the functionality to be able to add, remove, change menu items based upon what your users want to see and what you want your users to see. So we've also got LDAP only support. We have a couple of accounts that are using this. Somebody in the Slack channel today was talking about Open Directory. So that's something that you can now work with that you couldn't easily before. Also, if you're with Open LDAP, or just a standard LDAP implementation with Kerberos, Nomad will be able to work with that. We've also done some changes to the password synchronization, in particular if you've got network or local users that you don't want to sync the passwords for. We can go into that a little bit as well. Added a sign out command so that you can have an action that happens whenever a user signs out. And then we've also changed some of the password expiration options, which we'll show you as well. So with the LDAP only support, if you have LDAP with a Kerberos environment, MIT or Heimdall, we don't care. We'll be able to work with that. We don't do password expiration, and that's partially because there doesn't seem to be a real standard way to do password expiration in an LDAP environment. But if somebody's got some needs in those areas, please let us know because we'd love to take a look and see what we can do. And we will pull group memberships from LDAP as well. So that can be pretty nice. We can show you that a little bit, how we do that with AD, and it'll be very similar then for an LDAP environment. We also have the ability to support LDAP over SSL. We had a few places that asked for this with regards to Active Directory, and so once that got done, it definitely applies to the LDAP only environments as well. So keep your LDAP secure. Unlike Active Directory, which uses some of the Kerberos tickets to actually encrypt the connection, your LDAP may or may not do that. So going to LDAP S is a good idea. Sync exceptions. This is a pretty cool feature for some of the admin accounts out there. If you're not familiar with, Nomad can do synchronization of the Active Directory domain password down to the local user account. So that way, even though you're not bound, the local account will have the same password as the Active Directory account that the user has. This is great until, of course, it isn't. And if you have tech staff that are logging into machines, and they need to use Nomad to get a Kerberos ticket to perhaps mount some network shares or do some other things as an admin, you don't want their admin password to be synchronized down. That way, it's not good to have your admin accounts stuck in your users' keychains. So you can now push out lists of local users and network users. So either a local account, perhaps you have a IT admin account on all your machines. You don't want to be storing passwords in that keychain because it's a general purpose account. Or if you have network users, such as IT admins, techs, whatever else, you don't want to be syncing their passwords down accidentally into a user's keychain. So now you can push out lists of local users and network users, and then we won't synchronize between the Active Directory account and the local user in those cases. So very handy to have in a managed environment. We've also updated some password expiration options, in particular in the education sites that we work with. A lot of organizations have very lengthy password expiration policies of 180 days or maybe even once a year. And they didn't want to see that countdown in the menu bar the entire time. So now you can suppress that countdown until a number of days of your choosing. This makes it much easier. The users don't feel like they've got some impending doom hanging over them. And you can also set some custom messaging in the menu bar. And we'll show you that shortly in the demonstration we're going to be doing. We've added some new localizations as well. Nomad is now localized into 7 different languages: German, English, French, Dutch, Spanish, Polish, Swedish, I think is the 7. And in particular in 105, we added Spanish. We had somebody out there that had done the translation for us, so we thank you very much for that. And then Dutch was in some of the earlier versions, we've made sure it got added back into 105. If you do have a particular need for localization, we'd love to work with you. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes to localize Nomad into another language. So if you have an interest in a language that's outside of those 7, please let us know, and we can easily work with you. It's about 20 or 30 different pieces of text that need to get translated into another language. It's all just in a text file. You send it back to us, and then we include that back into Nomad. So very interested. If you have a need, please let us know. In particular, if you're interested in helping out, as we'd very much appreciate that going forward. All right. So without further ado, let's take a look at a few things here. So we've got a Sierra system, and I've got a VPN going. I'll disconnect that, and I'm going to launch Nomad. And you can see that we're up here. It lets us know that we're not connected. That's the Nomad menu icon. If I go down and connect to the VPN, now it's going to know that I'm connected, and I can come up here and I can do a sign in. And now I have a Kerberos ticket. It's going out to Active Directory right now, and it knows that I've got 39 days left in my password. Also, very handy if you don't know this, we encourage you to take a look at the preferences afterwards, because we'll do a lot of nice things for users. We want to make it very easy for admins to use Nomad and to get functionality out of it. So for example, we'll grab your Active Directory groups that you may be a member of, and we've put that into this preference file. So you can see that Andrew is a member of the ShareMounter test group and the demo users. Those will become a little more interesting later when I show you one. Some other information here, the user principal, the short name, and some other good stuff in here. Right now, you see that there's 39 days left in Andrew's password before it expires. But what we can come in, and this is one of the new features of 105, is you can have custom expiration times. And so right now we're going to set a key for the password expire custom alert, and we're just going to type in warning. And by setting that and then going up here and refreshing, you notice now that we've gotten rid of those 39 days and we've just got a red warning sign up there. You can determine how soon that warning is specified, and that's the password expire custom alert time key. And that we've set to 95 days here. If we set it to 15 and save this and then go back up here. That one's not as dynamic as I was hoping for. But now this warning will only show up at 15 days. So a couple of things that you can play around with in your environment. There's also a yellow warning where the text comes out in yellow, but it doesn't work as well on the dark mode systems as we would like. So we're going to go up and clear this and just delete and go with this other shell where I had it. We're going to delete that password expire alert, and then we're going to be back to the 39 days here. So some fun ways of kind of manipulating that and making it a little bit easier on your users without being annoying to them. This is the Nomad menu that you see, number of different items in here. And like I said, one of the other features of 105 was being able to block a few more of these. We have some sites that don't want to show the lock screen, some sites that don't want to show the sign out, other items in here. So if you have one that can't be done, and please take a look at our web page. If you go to nomad.menu and you go over to help, preferences and what they do is the entire list of all the preferences that we have available now and which version of Nomad they appeared in. There's about 75 that as an admin you can manipulate. So we'd encourage you to take a look through some of those. If you've got some pretty exotic needs, there's probably a decent chance that we've already had someone that had that same need and has gone through and asked us to be able to support that. You know, some things in here are if you've got an Active Directory sites that don't work, you can tell Nomad to ignore site lookup from AD. Or if they kind of work, but you're getting the wrong one, you can actually force the site that Nomad will use. Things like that to kind of help make your organization a little bit easier to work with. As we know, changing AD can be pretty hard, especially if you're the Mac admin. So we like to make it pretty easy to be able to change Nomad to kind of account for that. I will draw your attention at the bottom of this list. There is a list of about 10 different preference keys that we'd ask you not to force or change in any way. These are used by Nomad internally. You can read from them to your heart's content. There are things such as the display name of the currently logged in user and things like that. We've had a few accounts that have accidentally forced these to something, which then acts in some pretty strange ways for Nomad. So just take a look at and make sure you see the bottom of that list. The other thing, as long as we're talking about preferences, we do now have a section here, standard preferences. As a lot of people were starting to get a little intimidated by that list of 75 that we had. So we wanted to make sure that we had a much shorter list. So these are the 9 that we find most accounts looking at. Some are pretty self-explanatory, like the AD domain at the top. If you don't have that set, it's going to be a little bit harder to use Nomad. The rest are optional, but they're things that most sites are enabled or at least looking at. Things like the UPC alert. This is for unannounced password changes. So this allows users to be able to look for things specifically, or for users to be notified of when their password has changed through Active Directory users and computers, or perhaps on another system, whether that be a PC or a Mac. And then we can do various things with that. Commonly used when you're still using Nomad in a bound environment. In this way, we can pick up on those password changes within about 15 or 20 minutes whenever Nomad runs the next time. And that way, users, since they seem to have a very short time span where they can remember their previous password, ideally we get them when they have both the new and the old password available, and that we can make sure that we get all that synchronization done on the Mac. So quick tour of 105. It's what our currently shipping version is. You can get it from the nomad.menu website, and you'll be able to see stuff there. And real quick, I also wanted to bring up Keychain Minder. This is an application that we put out open source as well a few weeks ago. If you have users that are in an AD environment, in particular if they're bound, you can still sometimes run into issues where their password has been changed while their Mac was shut down or Nomad wasn't running, and we weren't able to pick up on that password change. In those particular situations, as you're probably painfully aware of, when the user logs into the system again, they will have a kind of random sounding dialogue from Apple that says a few things like, would you rather delete your keychain or create a new one? And they're a little bit confused. Since that dialogue text is not editable by an admin, we wanted to make sure that there was a tool that allowed you to do that, and that's Keychain Minder. So with Keychain Minder, it's designed to be run just at login. You can use a launch agent to do this, but I wouldn't set it to keep alive, so it's not constantly launching this. And Keychain Minder launches, it checks to see if the user's keychain is unlocked. If it is, it silently goes away. The user doesn't even know it ran. If the keychain is locked, it then presents this dialog box. which has the same functionality as the Apple dialog box, but since the code is out there, you're able to change it to whatever you want. We know that in particular environments, there's certain terminology that's used for a network password versus a local password. So we wanted to make sure that you had the ability to make those changes on your own. You're also more than welcome to add some of your own graphics to this, perhaps a logo. With Nomad being a product that constantly deals with users' passwords, we're very cognizant of the need to ensure that users aren't just blindly typing their passwords into any dialog box that pops up. So in this case, we'd encourage you to go out and do some modification of this to make sure that your users wouldn't be confused and that they feel secure and safe in where they're putting in their passwords. Next, we want to chat about Nomad 1.1. If you're in our Slack on the macadmins.org Slack, there's the Nomad channel, #Nomad. We've been putting a lot of the betas into there on almost a weekly basis for 1.1. So in addition to some bug fixes and some other housekeeping that we'll have in there, the kind of big highlighted items are keychain item updates. And in this case, whenever you change your password in Nomad, we'll know your old password and we'll know your new password. And Nomad will be able to go through your keychain and update specific keychain items. These could be an Exchange password, for example, or a password for Microsoft Lync or Skype for Business, or any sort of other arbitrary passwords that are in the user's keychain that would need to be updated as well. This makes it very easy for the user not to have to be, assaulted with password prompts after changing their password on the network. So that's in there. We know there's going to be a lot of edge cases because all passwords are a little bit different. So we're looking for some beta testing on that and for what use cases you'd like to solve. So please feel free to go to the Nomad Slack channel, pick up the beta, and start doing some testing on that. We also have arbitrary share mounting, and I'll show you that in a little bit. This allows you to push a preference file of any number of arbitrary file shares that you have. Could be on Windows servers, could be SMB shares and other servers. We'll also be able to handle NFS, SMB, WebDAV, and AFP. Nomad will look at this list, and based upon the group membership that the currently logged in user has, will then mount those shares or just show them to the user in a little pullout on the menu. So it should make this very simple for navigating through a number of Windows shares that you may have on your network, with only showing them to some users but not to others. So we tried to make this very simple and wanted to make sure that it was easy for an admin to push out. We're also doing some work, and those two items are in green. They're already in the betas, so we'd encourage you to take a look at them. And if they're not working for your environment, let us know, because we'd love to make it work better. Additionally, for the 1.1 release, we're also looking at 802.1x profile configuration. And this would be where when your user logs into AD and gets a certificate in particular from the Windows Web CA, we'll be able to match that certificate up to a wireless profile. We're still looking at various ways to be able to present that out to the user, but then they'd be able to look at that wireless profile and be able to do that. And we do have a question coming in, is 1.1 going to work with nested groups in regards to shares? We are interested in that. There's a feature request already on the GitLab page for supporting that. We're excited about that, and I think it should be pretty easy to be done. However, the concern we have is that probably not every environment will want to do all the resolution on the nested shares. So my expectation is that not share resolution, but group resolution will be a optional piece. There'll be another preference key. We'll be up to like 80, 85, I think, by the time 1.1 is done. It'll be an optional preference key that an admin can set, and then would allow you to do that nested group resolution. And once we have that, that will work for all use cases of groups within Nomad. So it'll be more than just the shares. It'll be anything else. And then it'll write those groups out to that preference file as well, so that if you have scripts or extension attributes or other things that you want to navigate with that, you can. All right, so the profile configuration, and then as before, we're going to have some bug fixes in that. So wanted to give you a quick demo of 1.1. And also, as we're talking, since I mentioned preferences quite a bit, I do want to bring your attention, if you go to the preferences file here or the preferences window, excuse me, you can see that a number of these are grayed out. This is because they've been forced through a profile, which I can show you here in System Preferences. If we go to Profiles, and I go to Nomad Prefs. So anything that you force through a profile, ideally through an MDM solution, but you can install these profiles locally as well if you'd like, those will then show up as grayed out in the UI so that users aren't confused about what may be going on. So we're going to quit out of 105 here and head on over to 1.1. Another new feature for 1.1 is that we plan on incorporating a welcome screen so that users won't be as confused as to what this new triangle is on the menu bar. We plan on having this fully configurable by admins. The things that probably won't change are the version number in the bottom and then some of the UI down there to be able to move through it. Above that, though, where that text is, we want you to be able to configure it as an admin so that it completely matches what you're trying to convey to your users. And then if you do have custom icons, we have a few sites that are using custom icons for Nomad. We should be able to read those in and put them into that place. So beautiful. All right. We do have another question about defaults. Is there a model for setting preferences as defaults, but allowing users to override some of them? Currently, not as such, and that's mostly because it comes from OS X. When you're looking at forced preferences, it's kind of an all or nothing. It's possible that you could mess around with doing a set once settings, but I would suggest that it would be easier to have a first run script or something like that when you're provisioning a user account to just set up a couple of defaults that would maybe, and in particular, you're probably talking about things like, renew ticket, where you don't want to necessarily force the ticket being renewed, but you want the user to be able to do that. In that case, I'd probably just use the defaults command as the user, maybe on a first login script or something else like that, to be able to set that default key and then move in from there. All right, so back to 1.1. This is the welcome screen. Like you can see, we can move through that. Very similar, of course, because it's a minor version, but here's the big difference, which is the file server setting. So now we've actually mounted a Z drive. We wanted to name it Z so that the Windows users would feel very at home. There's other file servers that the user would have access to. By clicking on them, we will mount those as well. We have a variety of keys, and I can show you this preference file. And just to prove, let me see, where's this preference file? We'll move over to the terminal here. Defaults, read, com.truesource, labs, nomad, .shares. No, if I spelled defaults right. So here's the preference file that's been set up for these SharePoints. And as you go through here, you can see a couple of things. You can have SharePoints that auto mount or not. You can have SharePoints that only mount if you're connected to the domain. As we probably going to take a guess, although we wanted this to be configurable, that most of the SharePoints that you have are probably behind your VPN, firewall, whatever it is that you have. So you can set a connected only flag to ensure that the shares will only be connected when you actually can see the domain. Here's the groups dictionary, or array, excuse me, of what groups will only show the SharePoint to. So if this user wasn't a member of the ShareMount or test group, that file share wouldn't show up. Here, that second one, we have an auto mount is set to 1. So now we know we'll auto mount that SharePoint. We also have an options dictionary that you can put in here. So this could be a vast array of things. We can mount SharePoints as read-only. We can mount them as read-write. We can mount them with the no exec bit set. There's about 30 different keys that you can add here. We expect that read-only is probably going to be the most heavily used one. And you can set it as non-browsable, which means it doesn't show up on the desktop or in the Finder for the user. And that way you can actually mount it somewhere else, because we've also got a local mount flag here where you could put a path to where you wanted to mount that particular URL. So some really cool stuff. As I said, the file mounting is all in the current betas that we've been releasing to the Slack channel. So if you have an interest, please go and take a look at those. And if you go to the web page and you go to the news section, we do have some information about the file shares and the preferences that we have for that. that are in there. There we go, shares preferences. And this kind of explains this shares preference plist, all the options that are in it, and what things are going to be able to do. Here, for example, is those some 24 different options that you can have when you mount that SharePoint. So if you have any interest in this, please take a look at this. It's got a sample version that you can start playing around with, and also some other things. So wonderful with that. We've got another question about using Cisco ICE and with Nomad and doing the connection between the machine account and AD. We are very interested in having some third-party kind of setups like this. The question is, how do you really validate that the host is what the host says it is? How do you validate that you're going to the right Active Directory domain? We'd love to kind of poke around what your environment needs for those kinds of situations. If you're interested, please contact me, Joel at nomad.menu, or catch me on the Slack, and we'd love to chat about how we can get some of those verifications of the host and other things done. Because we are cognizant of Active Directory not always being the easiest thing to trust. And so we want to make sure that we're going to the right place. All right. So that's 1.1. Hope to have it out here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the support plans. It's with the help of a number of accounts that have been very interested and have supported us through the support plans. So if you are using Nomad, you want to phone a friend, you just want a little help, we'd encourage you to reach out to us, and we'd love to work with you. And we do have some very easy ways of getting into this. And it's with the support of these accounts that we've been able to create as many different options and other things in the program as we have. In particular, and it probably comes as no surprise, that our accounts with support plans, we do those features a little bit quicker than some of the others that are out there. So thank you very much to those of you who do have plans and contracts with us. Thank you for your support there. It is with great pleasure that I'd like to announce one of our first new commercial products here, which is going to be Nomad Pro. Something that we've been working on for a little bit. Ideally, it's everything you like about Nomad, but without the Active Directory part. At Nomad, we do realize that the concept of binding machines to Active Directory, even on the Windows side, is kind of quickly becoming a thing of the past. That's not to say that Active Directory won't be around. Active Directory will be here for a very long time, and will be very useful for a very long time. But the efficacy of binding a machine to a specific domain and having that hard-coded connection is kind of going away. In particular, as you're seeing a lot of these identity providers, cloud solutions, some are on-prem, coming up, we have a lot more people asking us about SAML. In particular, Azure AD or ADFS. There's a number of different flavors of it. Okta, Ping, OneLogin. So we're very excited to talk about Nomad Pro today. Right now, it currently supports authentication to Okta, but it will be supporting as many of the other IDPs as we can get to in a very short period of time. And we've got a list here in a little bit of all the ones that we're looking at. It will do local password sync. In many cases, when you're looking at some of the IDPs, primarily they're used for web-based technologies. You can sign in once, and then you can go to Salesforce, you can go to your Jamf server, you can go to your other MDM services. You can go to any one of a number of web technologies without having to retype your password. However, all of that stays within the web, within Safari or within Chrome. So Nomad Pro extends that out so that you're able to do this within the macOS itself. And that means you can now synchronize your password very similar to how Nomad does it today with Active Directory. You can synchronize your Okta password down to your local account password. This will also, of course, do File Vault and the keychain. And since we know a lot of sites may be kind of bridging between an Active Directory environment and an Okta environment, we can also get Kerberos tickets as a side effect of an Okta login. Since we have the password and Nomad already knows about Active Directory and everything else, we have that. And then I'll show you in a little bit a Safari extension that we're using that kind of helps keep everything managed and keep the user on the straight and narrow. So what we're currently working on, we have Okta support currently, and then we're working on Ping, OneLogin, G Suite, and ADFS. Perhaps not quite in that order, although Ping and OneLogin are going to be a little easier for us than I think than Google and ADFS will. But we'd like to support all of those by the time we're done. All right, so a quick demo of this. Hide a few things for you. Quit out of Nomad 1.1 and then move on to Nomad Pro. Very similar to Nomad, you've got an icon up here in your menu bar, and you can pull down and you can do a sign in. In this particular case, I've already signed in before, so it remembers my username. I've got my password. I can store this in the keychain, and then I can pick my browser, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and Opera. If they're installed, we find them and we put them in that browser list. We'll also look in the user's preferences, and we'll pick the current browser that is their default browser. So in a perfect world, they're already using Safari in this case, and all they have to do is click sign in. We're now using the Okta APIs to authenticate the user. We fully support multi-factor. So if you're using Okta Push, Google Authenticate, or in this case, Duo, we're more than happy to support those. We'll present the user with different UI based upon what the push factor or the second factor is. In this case, I'm going to do a Duo push to my phone. And you can't see it, but I'm going to now approve the request on my phone, put in my password, and now I've authenticated, and now it's taken me straight to my Okta dashboard. So very simple, very easy to use for the users. Now they have one place that they can go and then launch an Okta session. If you go down here to preferences, we've got a couple of things, a redirect URL. I'll show you that shortly. Very simple to just put in the authentication domain. Right here is an Okta preview domain that we're using. Warn on password expiration, whether you put the password in the keychain or not, and then if you're going to synchronize the local password. If you select this, it's very similar to Nomad with Active Directory, in that it'll go through and then, like I said, synchronize your file vaults, your keychain, and everything else down to that local user account. Of course, we have Get Software and Get Help, also the lock screen option, very much right out of Nomad. We also have a lot of preference keys underneath the hood, so you can change all of the menu titles. You can decide whether the menus are hidden or not, and everything else there. What I would like to show you now is the Safari extension that we have. If we quit out of Safari so I can clear that Okta session token and relaunch, and if we go up here to preferences, we have a Nomad redirector. And what this will do, if a user is going to log into Okta through a web page, we will catch that with this extension, and then we'll show the Nomad UI instead. And what this means is that a user doesn't really have to change their preferences. Instead, they can try going to here, and notice we've redirected them, in this case, apple.com, but that's settable by the admins. And instead, we've popped up the UI for Nomad. So now we know that we can grab that password, make sure it's synchronized to the local account, go through the two-factor, whatever else we need to do, and then show the user their Okta dashboard when they're done. And now that I've authenticated on my phone, this goes back up. So it's a very simple way for integrating into an Okta environment without really changing the user's workflow. And then, of course, much like Nomad, we've got scripts that can be fired when a user logs in. We also write out the user's username. If I can show you this, defaults read menu.nomad, Nomad Pro. So now I can see what users logged in, what the redirect URL is. And so similar to Nomad with Active Directory, you can use this to check with scripts or other things what's the Okta account that's currently in use on this system. So we hope it adds a little smoothness to rolling out an IDP like Okta and being able to give you some more information in there. Somebody's asking about smart card integration for Nomad Pro. You're kind of leading the witness here because I'm going to talk about some of our smart card integrations in a little bit. However, we don't currently have the authentication to Okta being done through a smart card, but I don't think it would take us much more than a couple of days of looking at it. I know that Okta has recently just put that out as a developer preview. So we're going to be taking a look at that pretty quickly and then allowing that functionality. Because from what we've read, it shouldn't be a big deal. And especially since we have a lot of the smart card information already working. So that's Nomad Pro. We've got a beta that you can sign up for today. So you're more than welcome to do that. Put your name on the list. We'll be pushing out a version of it for testing here probably by early next week. It's already working, as you can see, but we want to get some experience with a number of users as to what you might want for your functionality, and just make sure that we've got the workflow from a user perspective down well. So you can go to nomad.menu/beta, and you can sign up for the beta of the Nomad Pro there. We don't have pricing finalized yet, but we expect it to be under $10 for one copy, and then going down significantly with volume as you go forward. All right, the next product we'd like to talk about in particular with smart cards is Nomad with PK-init. We had an initial smart card integration that we had done where we'd kind of grafted smart cards into Nomad that you're using, the Nomad 1.0 code base. And we thought it was all great. And then we had an account that came up to us and kind of challenged us pretty heavily to maybe rethink workflows, to not think about things as an engineer, but actually think about things as a user, and how can smart cards be made as simple and as easy as possible. And so we now have Nomad with PK-init, which will form the code base for Nomad 2.0. So it gives you an idea that we're already working on a lot of these newer things here. So this is support for PK-init, which is getting Kerberos tickets from identities, in particular on a smart card. No Active Directory is required. So if you just have a plain old Kerberos or a Heimdall domain, we're more than welcome, or realm, excuse me, we're more than welcome to use that. If it's Active Directory, we're very happy to use that as well. We do have an alert if the card is left inserted. We were told that in some cases, your smart card is also your building access. And it was kind of annoying if users left the card in the reader when they left their office, went out to lunch, or whatever else, as it becomes much harder to get back into the building if you don't have your smart card with you. Also wanted to make it very easy, because we know in these situations with smart cards, you may have multiple Kerberos realms that you're dealing with. So we wanted to make sure that it would be very simple to switch from one Kerberos identity to another. So now we have full-blown credential cache switching as well in this. Here's an example of the UI, and you can see that I've logged in and I've got multiple tickets. This is also how Nomad will deal with multiple domains. We've had a few questions over the last couple of months about, hey, I use Nomad, love it, but I use it in multiple accounts. Perhaps you're a consultant, something else, and you want to be able to use it in multiple places. So Nomad with PK-init can handle that, and we're going to roll that into Nomad 2 as well as we go forward. So that way you'll be able to have multiple domains and can configure it as such. We also wanted to make sure that we made it very easy for the user when they did have multiple accounts. So Nomad now has the concept of accounts, where you can set up a Kerberos principal and then map it to the public key hash of a certificate. And now when you're in Nomad and you want to sign in, all you got to do is put in your card. We automatically know which account goes with it, and then we can go ahead and get your tickets that way. We're also very interested in doing configurations where we can filter the certificates based on policies. Maybe you have policy objects on those certificates. We can filter out showing just what certificates you can see. We'll also be able to do a few other manipulations with that, since we know all the OIDs of those certificates. Hopefully we can get pretty crafty for you and provide some very custom setups in that case. Here's an example of the UI for when the card has been inserted. That's user selectable, or of course, just like anything in Nomad, if you push it out through a preference file, you'll be able to force the user into particular behavior as well. So in this case, they're going to get warned every 2 minutes if the card isn't removed, and then some other preferences in there about when to update status, and then what default Kerberos realm to use, for example. So as I said, filters identities based on policy objects or extended key usage items. It can use a crypto token kit, which was new to Sierra essentially, or the older token D. And then of course, just like any other Nomad product we have out there, you can use the Git software, Git help, and a lot of the other menu customizations are available to you, because we want to make sure that it's still very usable as a system for everything that you're looking for. Also, we're working on creation of users without passwords. We know that in particular in the government accounts, you have a large interest in having accounts that just have a smart card associated with them and never have a password touch that account. So we have some ideas on that we think can be very, very clever. I'll talk about one here in a few minutes. And then we're also working on some different ways to do just-in-time configuration of smart card accounts. We have Nomad Helper, which I'll talk about shortly, which will allow you to create accounts without passwords, but you do have to kind of know what user is going to be logging into what machine. So we're also looking at doing some hopefully very clever things with the login window to be able to allow you to have out-of-band authentication and then create accounts as you need them when users walk up to the machine. We've got some ideas on how we can do this in a very secure way, and I think can make it much easier perhaps to support a Mac in a very high security environment. So this version of Nomad is also available in a beta form, so we'd encourage you to sign up on this beta list, nomad.menu/beta. This is also maybe not finished software, but it's in very, very good shape, very suitable for testing. And so we'll send it out to you. We'd love to hear some feedback as to what we can add and other things that could be done there. Finally, since we have a few minutes left, I'd also like to talk about Nomad Helper. You may have seen me, we did a session on this at Mac DevOps. It's because somebody has asked, what was the Elevate Privilege thing? So we'll talk about this because Nomad Helper allows us to do a lot of things that kind of fill in some of the gaps that you may have if you don't have a directory service. So in the past, if you go back in time a little bit, back into the 10.3, 10.4 timeframe, you had both users and policies that were distributed to the Mac via LDAP or Active Directory. So that was cool. It was great. Then MDM came along, and the policies, and that's the old workgroup manager icon for those of you familiar with it, got moved over to MDM. The problem is users aren't available from MDM, so you still have to have some sort of directory service to be able to get accounts on machines. Well, what we're doing with Nomad Helper is we're allowing you to create accounts with configuration profiles. So you'll be able to push a configuration profile that will create an account. You can manipulate a password, you can associate a smart card with that account, and you can also do membership of groups with that configuration profile as well. So in this particular case, what you saw before in those screenshots with the privilege escalation is the ability to use your Kerberos credentials that you've already used when you signed into Nomad to connect up, going through Nomad Helper, and elevate that account you're currently logged into the Mac as for a period of a couple of minutes, whatever you want to define as an admin. And then when that time period is over, the profile goes away and the user ceases to become an admin. And we'll show you a couple of workflows of where that might be interesting. So Nomad Helper, it comes as a root level daemon, does not require any network access as it just responds to preference keys that have been pushed through MDM. Or configuration profiles. If you're using Monkey or some other solutions, as long as you can deploy configuration profiles, you'll be more than able to use Nomad Helper with them. We can manage objects in 3 different places. We can manage them as users. We can manage group membership. At this time, we only do admin group membership. But if you have a need for other groups, we'd love to talk because we'll be able to manipulate that membership as well. And then we're able to change auth authorities for users. You can either have this all in one object, one configuration profile that you're pushing out, or you can have them in multiple configuration profiles. Nomad Helper will collate them all and then do the right thing with them. So the big use case that we have for this, and this came out very early on with Nomad, they are looking for different ways of elevating that user to an admin. If you follow the Nomad frame of mind and you're able to think about life without a directory service directly connected to the Mac, things are really cool. You go past a lot of kind of hiccups that you may have with a hardbound directory, things like that. But you do have one kind of problem in that if you have network admins, if you have techs that may be walking up to those machines, how do you become an admin on that machine without having a directory service? So that was the original desire behind Nomad Helper, and then we've kind of spawned off from there a little bit. So in the local admin case, you would sign into Nomad. You would get authenticated via your Kerberos credentials. We'll then do a little bit of a JSON payload authenticated with those Kerberos credentials up to the Nomad Helper web host. And this is something that can be deployed on-prem, or we hope to have a SaaS solution going forward as well if you don't want to have to think about it. That web host will then validate the Kerberos credentials, take that information, which is what machine it's come from, the serial number of that machine, some other bits of information, and then using the MDM API of your MDM server, whether this is AirWatch or Jamf or Simple MDM or one of the others, we'll have a number of connectors for all of the ones with an API. We will create a configuration profile, in your MDM server, and that profile will then get pushed down. That profile will then get picked up by Nomad Helper, and Nomad Helper will make that local user an admin. By default, we'll set it to 5 minutes, but you can update that as much as you want. And this is a really simple way of, as long as you have MDM or some way of pushing profiles, you can elevate users and hopefully get them into a good workflow where, even though all of your users may be admin today, you'd probably prefer if they weren't, not because you don't trust them, but just because you want to have the smaller attack surface. However, you, on the flip side, don't want to have all the help desk tickets for users needing to be elevated to an admin for one-off reasons. So this way would give you a very simple method of keeping you as secure as possible, keeping the users as non-admins. However, whenever they need to be elevated to an admin, all they have to do is go up to the Nomad application on the menu bar, pull down to elevate. We'll go through this round trip. We'll make sure that it's done in a secure way. You've got off-box logging here in that web host, and you'll be able to get all that information and everything else that you need out of it. So we're very excited about this, and we've been looking at a couple of ways of doing this. In particular, the simplest way for the user is just to have it integrated in with Nomad. Whether it, whichever version of Nomad you're using, have a checkout admin option in there. And similar to how we've done a number of the other options, you won't have to worry about which group, because we'll be able to find out the group of the user from AD and then act accordingly. So you could limit this to only have some groups being available for it. Or if you want any user to be able to do it, you could do that as well. Some workflows that we're looking at in addition to just the user elevation, a full-blown employee onboarding, where perhaps when a new employee comes into the office, you have them instantiated in an HR system, Zenefits or Bamboo HR or anything else, or perhaps a proprietary database of your own choosing. We want to be able to find that, get that user that as soon as they get created, look up in your asset management system to determine what free Macs you may have. If you don't have a spare Mac, go out and buy one for you using that asset management system, and then incorporate this all into MDM so that there's a profile in your MDM server that uniquely combines a user account for that one machine. The machine would then be shipped directly to the user. The device enrollment program would kick in. The user would be able to enroll themselves through DEP, and then they'd get to the login window, and at the login window, their account would be waiting for them because Nomad Helper would have put it there. So either this would be through a smart card or through a password. If it's done through a password, you'd set it to a default, and then as soon as they've logged into the system, they'd be able to then use Nomad in one of its various flavors to then synchronize their password back to Active Directory, to Okta, or some other system. We have a question on how would this work for DEP. Very, very easily. That's why DEP is in this flow. All you have to do for DEP is just suppress the user creation so that the user doesn't have the opportunity to create a username and password on the machine. It simplifies the DEP enrollment process a little bit, so it makes it very simple with that. And we'll go through, and the user will just pick the time zone typically, or whether they want to use location services. There's no account creation. They get immediately sent to the login window, and at the login window, they'll then be able to log in with a smart card or with a default password that has been set through Nomad. Somebody else is asking, can we force a password change on first login? We are looking at a couple of different ways of doing that, and one would be pretty easy to set a local policy to do that. We're also looking at, once you'd signed into the Mac through that default password, you would then launch Nomad. Nomad would then take the user through signing into whatever their network directory is. that would then have them reset their password back in AD, back in Okta. Then it would synchronize down locally. So we are looking at a couple of different ways of how you can manipulate this so that obviously a default password is not a great place to be. And then obviously a happy user there. The other use case we have here is an IT admin account. Right now, probably a lot of you have an IT admin account scoped to every single machine. Ideally, that doesn't have the same password, but we know that in a lot of cases it does. So a workflow with Nomad Helper is the ability to have one skeleton account. So with one profile, you can push out one skeleton account to every single machine in your estate. However, that account does not have a password, nor does it have nor is it a member of the admin group. So very simple, does not increase your attack surface, but it's there. When you want to be able to do some work on that machine, you would walk up to that system and through a console at Nomad Helper on a web page, sign into a web page using your Active Directory credentials, your Okta credentials. We'll be looking at a couple different ways of doing this. You'll then be able to check out that admin account. So you'd be able to specify the machine that you want to use, and then in a perfect world, associate that with a YubiKey or a smart card. Even if you don't have a smart card infrastructure, the YubiKeys are really, really cool to use because that way you don't have to put passwords across the wire or put a password on the machine. So by checking out that IT account, you'll then know that a particular user with a particular YubiKey is going to be able to log into that machine. And then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, whatever you set as a default, that entire password and group membership in the admin group gets torn down. So even if the tech forgets to do any cleanup at the end, within a few minutes, all of the bits that could potentially be an attack vector get taken off the machine, and you're back to just a skeleton account without a password associated with it. So some very cool workflows that we're looking at for that. And then you get kind of just-in-time elevation. And like I said, in a perfect world, you'll be able to issue a couple of YubiKeys to your techs, and that way you'll have a very, very secure environment of doing privilege escalation and having IT admins log on to machines without having to send passwords around, ask users for passwords, or things like that. So still to come with some stuff, the web API for the Nomad web host, the Nomad Helper web host, and then doing some account password manipulation. We want to be able to easily allow you to do things like provision a user through a configuration profile, but if that user moves on, gets hit by the lottery, right, goes to a beach and never works again, to be able to keep their account on the system, but then set up a YubiKey or other token to be able to allow for logins. So that way a tech can come up, get maybe all the files off the system, whatever, without having to delete that account or otherwise ask the user for the password or some other things like that. So we've got some really, really cool ideas on this. We're not ready to have an open beta on this yet, but we'll probably be doing that in the next couple of weeks as we go forward. So with that, we've gone about 55 minutes. I wanted to thank you very much for all your time. We know for some of you it's a little later in the evening, and for some of you it's pretty early in the morning. So we're very thankful that you've dropped in on us. Hopefully this has given you a good overview of what we're currently doing, what we have coming. Again, if you're interested in any of those beta programs, please go to nomad.menu/beta and sign up for them. Somebody is asking if this will be able to download. Yes, we did one of these webinars yesterday, and we're doing this one today. We'll take the best of the two, and we'll put them up on YouTube. So if you have colleagues, if you have friends, if you have family members that didn't see this and you want to share it with them, you'll be more than welcome to be able to do that. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate all your support of our products and using our stuff. Thank you.